What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about 3 things the technical test for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game must do. So with the test just a few weeks away, we're getting ever so close. I'm getting very, very excited as the days get counted down. And, last video, we talked about what the technical test is going to be. They did a FAQ on their site, and they kind of just, answered the questions, as you would probably imagine. But we're going to go through a couple things that I do think we need to walk away from this test and say, all right, we either got it or we didn't get it, and judge accordingly. But one thing I want to throw out just before we get into it, and I had said this on the Everything You Need to Know video, but I do think this is important. The technical test, and they say it on their site, that's why it's so important. They say on their site it's literally for the back end stuff, right? It's to make sure the servers, the loading, like all that kind of stuff is working or will work for the game to come out. So one thing I don't expect that this, technical test is it's going to be a flawless experience where you don't get dropped or there's not long server times. Those things are going to happen because that is literally the point of it. But the reverse of that, and I do think this is the most important thing, is that the game at its core is done. There may be tweaks. I'm sure there's like buffs and debuffs and stuff, but the core of what this game is, the replayability, the balancing, for the most part, a lot of that stuff is already done. So if this game is good going out of the technical test, chances are the base game's good. If the game is, have some huge problems and they wouldn't be server related, that is also a huge indicator because you imagine the base game would then have the same problem. So I just kind of wanted to throw that in there. They themselves admitted it. It's nothing new, but I wanted to say it. All right, the first thing this needs to do is show us balancing. So I mentioned balancing, a little bit earlier. I don't know if I would put this like number 1 if I'm literally ranking these. I don't think I'm ranking them, but the idea of balance. So what do I mean by that? Well, there's 2 different kinds of balancing for a game like this. There's the balancing between the victims, which I believe is what they call them, the victims, and then the killers. Are they both fun to play? Do you feel rewarded by playing as both? Now, they're not going to have the same draw as each other. And there's, I guess, one more layer, and it's, will each of them be balanced against each other? So all the killers, are they going to be, okay, well, you don't have to play as Leatherface. He's cool, but other characters are also cool, and they're cool for different reasons. Same thing for victims. So that, to me, is one of, if not maybe the most important thing. And it comes down to actually all elements. You could look at servers, right? Predator Hunting Grounds had this issue. Playing as the Predator was really fun. Playing as the, whatever you call it, fire team, I think is actually what they call them. Playing as the fire team was definitely not as fun. And it's not just me saying it, it's not just an opinion, but it's also, it was represented in people playing it. The loading times to get into a match if you were playing as the fire team were instant because nobody wants to play as the fire team. So if you want to play as the fire team, you're going to get into a match immediately. But the Predator, if you want to get into a match, loading times or, getting into a server could take 5, 10, 15 minutes. And that was even at launch. It took a while even when that game launched. So that's just on the waiting period. You're sitting on your couch, you're waiting to be Leatherface. It's going to take you forever. Then you have the game itself, which I think would absolutely fail, right? If you only want to play as one side of the coin here, the game won't last. Now, it's not if, just one person maybe feels like that. It's if everybody, right? A large majority. So that's obviously something that this game can't do. You got to feel good playing as the victims, and you got to feel good playing as the killers. And, that's the thing for Dead by Daylight, Friday the 13th. All these games have that very similar problem that you either solve and your game lasts, or you don't solve and your game will probably die kind of immediately. However, then there's the game itself. And, well, how do you make characters feel balanced? How do you make yourself feel good, or how do you make the players feel good when they're playing as them? Well, that's number 2 on this list. Tension and atmosphere. So we've talked about this before with this game. A big, I'd say, pro of this game is that tension, is that, okay, you're starting, especially if you're the victims, you're starting very much as the underdog. In fact, you're literally in the basement of the house, right? So you have to escape, and that can be tough. And the things that we've seen of this game from pictures or videos, like, it looks tense. It looks scary. There's a focus on being hidden, right? Hiding behind things, not triggering anything that would make sound, right? So there's like chimes, and when you're walking through doors and closing doors, like, you got to be careful of the noise you're making. that already makes me feel very scared. Now that, you could find that, okay, well, maybe playing as victims is actually too hard because if killers get too good and there's already so much stuff working against the victims, maybe it's too hard. Maybe that actually turns people off. But I do think that's a really big positive with this game, even over a game like Friday the 13th. I think Friday the 13th could be tense or was tense in the right circumstance, but because it was bigger and when you load up, you're in different locations and the map is big and Jason can't literally be everywhere, so you can kind of escape. In this, everything is so claustrophobic, trying to keep, in tune with the movie, right? Everything's so close. You're all within the same vicinity. Like, you got to be very careful what you're doing. I think that, like, fear, dread, these kind of like buzzwords, I think that this game has over, like, I can't name. I don't think Predator had that. I don't think Friday the 13th had that. I don't even think Dead by Daylight has that to a degree. I think Dead by Daylight can, but this game, I think immediately, like, the selling point of this game is get ready immediately because you got to work together. You got to work fast. You got to work very calculated. As the victims, as the killers, who really knows? Maybe you could take your time as the killers, maybe you can't. Maybe the survivors are going to get really good, right? So that's going to be something that's also, I think, very important. That's something I absolutely think you can take away from the technical test. You leave the test and you say, that was, like, I had a heart attack playing the game. You can definitely say that or not say that leaving the technical test, and that's a good sign for obviously the base game. And then the final thing is the game lasting long term, and how does that work? So the last thing is replayability and its strategy. I guess I really could have made this list like 5 things because I'm kind of combining things into one category. So replayability, obviously, maybe this is also the most important thing, right? You could argue like balancing is so important, but also the idea that you want to play this game more times. You want to go back the next day, the next week, the next month. These games are not made to last for a day. Okay. I mean, just factually, they're not. So if this game comes out, does incredible the first day or week, and then falls off a cliff, you could probably consider it a failure because that's not what these games are built for. They are built for long-term success. Now, that is up to them how long they want it to succeed for. I can't predict that. I can't know what they want, but that is, the case. So replayability is heavily important. And how do you do that? Well, you leave the game, you leave the technical test saying, I want to play more. It's actually pretty easy. In fact, Crash Team Rumble, very different kind of game for sure, but Crash Team Rumble just did it. You left that game, or at least I left that game, saying, wow, that surprised me. I'm actually extremely into this, and I want to play this every single day for the rest of my life. I'm sure that feeling will go away eventually, but the sense of wanting to replay it, and that you can absolutely get that from the technical test. If you play the technical test, and I would argue this would be the worst case scenario, you play the technical test and you say, that was solid, like I felt fulfilled there, I don't feel an urge to play it again. Again, for a game that wants to last ideally more than like a couple days, that is the worst thing you could ever say to a game like that, right? Where it's like, I'm good. I don't need to play it tomorrow or even next week or even next month. Like, I'll come back eventually. That's not ideal. So obviously the game needs to do it. And how does it do it? Well, like I mentioned, strategy. You could throw in the tension and the atmosphere, right? Because if you're always feeling like a sense of dread, or it's fun, you're playing with other people, your friends or whatever, community, and you're having fun, obviously there's a bond there that you're going to want to do it again. But also the idea of literal replayability in the game. Well, you are going to be doing the same thing from like match to match generally. There may be small tweaks in the strategy here and there, but generally, just like in Dead by Daylight, you fix generators, you leave. And you run around and you try to dodge, the killer. That's the game. Now, that's not bad. I mean, it's very simplistic, but there's some skill to that. There's some strategy involved, but still, it doesn't change all that much. The strategy is not like hugely morphed. Maybe it is depending on the killer, but it's the same thing here. Maybe if you go up against a certain kind of killer in this, you may have to change your strategy. That can keep it alive. Or if it's just fun to play, if that hook, whatever the hook is just enjoyable and you want to do it, well, there you go. You did it, right? So they're very simplistic things, I feel, for these kind of horror games, but they're obviously very difficult to land. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed, bell icon turned on. I'm hoping I get into the technical test, and there'll be loads of videos if I do get in. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.